Okay, so we are going to go over the practice final exam, whether you are in class or not. If you were in class, you can just skip these first ones unless you just want to relive all that fun. And I'll go through the practice exam that I sent out. The answers are highlighted. I'll also post the answers in D2L along with the answers to all the other practice exams that are up there. And I'll be going over those in a different video. I just want to get this one out first. For the first question, in what area does the student rank the highest in his reference group? If we're talking about reference groups, we're talking about norm reference scores. And in the output that we have, you'll be asked to interpret output. I have norm reference scores, and then I have also criterion reference scores down below. Can't get to them though in my current setup. But these are the ones that I'm looking at. If I look at where they rank the highest, well, it's mathematics. And so that's a pretty straightforward question. Second question goes to the fact that the student has a science scaled score of 671, but a percentile rank of 55. However, they also have a social studies score of 669, which equals a percentile rank of 58. And I'm looking right down at these two here. Right? You know, also if I would look at grade equivalencies too, I could make the same argument that this is a lower score, but it corresponds to the higher grade equivalent. Question is, how can we explain this seeming inconsistency between the scaled score and the percentile rank? And the fact of the matter is that different content areas have different average scaled scores, and they're basically on a different scale. If we look at the WKCE score performance ranges or cut scores for different grades, and we compare across content areas, right, reading, language arts, math, science, and social studies, and so on, we see that, what's basically, if we wanted to say, pretend that 437 is right at the 50th percentile in math. Well, a 437 puts you off the charts in language arts. It puts you at about the same level, a little bit lower in reading. It puts you, up at the top again of science and off the charts in social studies. So each one of these content areas is basically scaled in a different way. And the average scaled score, the score that represents the 50th percentile, is going to be different for each one. So that's one way to explain that. Next question. The student's parent requests that their child be placed in high school math classes. Your likely response would convey, and here you shouldn't agree with them because there are severe content differences between what's going on in this student's grade. And if you look at this student, they're more than likely in the beginning of 7th grade. If we look at where their score is closest to the 50th percentile, and I look at the grade equivalency score that corresponds with that, well, here they scored as well as somebody as a 7th grader in the 3rd month of the school year, and they're slightly above the average. That means they're either in the 1st month of 7th grade, or maybe, probably not, but maybe in the last month of 6th grade. But that's where they are. And if we look at the math, their grade equivalency is 9.8. So this parent is saying, well, geez, my son or daughter really needs to be challenged, so we should move them into high school math classes. However, remember this data is just based off of 7th grade content. And it does not mean because they've mastered 7th grade content that they will also do very well in 8th grade or 9th or 10th grade content. So because the content changes across the grades, we can't really just flip people around here and there. Question 4. Which of the following statements is true regarding the student's national percentile range in language of 43 to 40? And again, these ranges here represent this error bar here. And that's where the diamond is where we see their score puts them in terms of the national percentile rank, and the bar represents the range where we are pretty sure that their true ability lies. And when I'm looking at this, because I know that it's a national percentile, because it's up here. I know it's a norm reference score. And the only one that's true here, it's not really computed against an external standard. I don't have a norm group of all the students in the world. I'm comparing them to other 7th graders. And so the score is computed against how all students in their reference group, whatever that may be, are performing or have performed. And if you have any questions on any of this stuff, feel free to email me. Next one, which of the following is true of a student's true score? Well, it's not always on the error bar, because sometimes, I gave the example in class, a monkey could get them all right. They would be up here, even though they don't know anything about language or math. And we would assume if their true score was always on, that their true score is somewhere up here, when in fact their true score would be down here. So the only true statement here is that it cannot be known. It's not given in grade equivalence. It is not measured without error. The next point is about interpreting percentile ranks. And if I'm looking at this, social studies, right? Their national percentile is 58. That means that 58% of the people who took this test did as well as or worse than they did, scored lower than or equal to their score. So 58% is the correct answer. If I ask the question, what percentage of students scored lower than and got rid of the or equal to, then I could not answer that question because I do not have enough information. Question 7, my little rant about stanines. The major limitation of stanines as a measure of rank performance is the fact that you lose all kinds of information. Why use this when I have national percentiles? Because this again is just a broken down area of national percentile scores. They're not even. If somebody's in the 5th stanine, they could be again down at the 40th percentile or at the 59th percentile. And why don't I just use their percentile rank? Number 8, we talked about this in class. The students' observed scores suggest that you could say they're above grade level, you could say they're at grade level. Again, we talked about how this darkened band here really represents what's typically considered as grade level. So you could argue that they're at grade level because all their dots and their total score are above grade level. You could say that they're above grade level, or you could even say that these scores don't really suggest anything super meaningful. The only thing I wouldn't give you credit for in this case is that they are below grade level. Hard to make that case in any real way. So question 9. The fact that the student scored above the 50th percentile in science but has not demonstrated mastery of many science subsections indicates, and here what we're looking at is, first of all, their rank in science. They're above the 50th percentile, but they have not, or this person has not demonstrated mastery of many science contents. In order to look at that, I need to look at my output down here, and I'm going to have to take a second to fix this up here. And what I'm looking at is my science area, and I see that if I'm looking at this, right, here's these little dots that are either empty, half filled, or completely filled. And if I look at my little legend, I see that open means low mastery, half filled means moderate mastery, and darkened means high mastery. They have low mastery in most areas, and just moderate mastery in 2 areas of science. Now, the only way that that would happen is if, I'm above average in science, but yet I haven't mastered anything, is if the people I'm being compared to just aren't that good in science. Another possible example would be, or a reason would be, that the standards in science, the objective standards that are represented here, are too high or too harsh. They're unrealistic. And so that you can, if you set the bar too high, you can still rank people, but everyone, when we look at criterion reference measures, are going to look like they're failing. So that's another possible explanation, not one of the options. Student's strongest content area, if we look at all the different content areas, fractions are over here. They have a score of 96. If we look at math computation, 96 or 86, man, I can't read that. Let me just a second. That looks like an 86. Order of operations, 88. And then analyzing text is up at 92. So you could say that analyzing text is. However, because of the error bars around their mastery thing, all those error bars overlap, so you could also say impossible to tell, and I would probably accept that. I would accept that answer. The student's OPI score of 72 for integers, and if I'm looking at my math and I'm looking at integers, math computation, right? I got 72. This is their student OPI. And if you look, OPI is an estimate of the number of items that a student could be expected to answer correctly if there had been 100 items for that objective. In other words, it's the percent correct that they got. Why they don't just say percent? Not sure. But, you know, people do what people do. So what it means is that they got 72% of the items correct. Does not mean they should get a D, because this kind of test is not designed in the same way that a regular test is designed. It does not have anything to do with their norm reference standing. Again, these are criterion measures, and then our below average, well, we don't know whether or not they're below average or not, because we don't know necessarily what people in their reference group got. It depends on who we're comparing to. We could compare them to the national OPI, and if I did that, I would see that they're actually above the average score. But then again, if I'm thinking in terms of, you know, the error bar, what their range might be, 50 to 78, kind of hard to tell. In the short answer section then, we've already talked about the fact that somebody's true score doesn't have to be on the line that represents a national percentile range. I'd like you to explain why or why not that's there, self-explanatory. Next question, does the performance in science indicate the student does not do well in science class? Well, no, and there's a lot of reasons that you can go here. You know, the school curriculum might not be the same as the content on the standardized test. Maybe, you know, just thinking of the science content you've looked at, perhaps a science test thinks that 4th graders or 7th graders should be studying the basics of chemistry. And in this school, chemistry is an 8th grade thing. And instead they focus mainly on biology and, you know, ecology and environmental science rather than chemistry. Students may master it and be very good at science in the context of the school, but they wouldn't do well on the test. We can think about issues of reliability with the test, motivation, attention, and guessing, and so on. And so there's a lot of factors that could go on. Even if there's a language issue, you could argue that the test was biased towards people who are proficient in English, and suppose that it's an ELL student who is getting support in their class and really understands the basic concepts. There could be a science scholar in their native country, but they're just having a hard time with the test because it's in English. Now, I told you this question will actually be on the exam, and so I would like you to pay special attention to it. If you look at this student and you look at their national percentile range, and again, here they're slightly above average here, and they're far above average in math, but seem to be lagging behind in other areas. And the teacher would say, well, why is that? You know, why is the math teacher so good, and why does everyone else in this school suck? Because my daughter's a genius, and so on. So how would you respond to that? And what are the reasons you should consider? You know, and here's a list of some. You know, she's just better at math. The school's curriculum is more geared towards math. She just got lucky and guessed. She cheated. Again, don't say that to the parent, but you could be thinking it. Or the school math curriculum is much more aligned, a lot easier to align mathematics with national standards or state standards or whatever standards this test is appealing to than the other content areas. And you can go on with a lot of other ones, so I will be looking for all sorts of stuff like that. Question 15, why do most assessments give both norm reference scores and a criterion reference score? What are the benefits and limitations of each? And the idea is that norm reference scores tell us rank, but they don't tell us levels of mastery or proficiency. Criterion gives us the other side of the coin. It tells us they tell us if anyone's any good, but they really don't allow us to rank people in a meaningful way, particularly in terms of what a 10-point difference actually stands for. So assessments give both because they want to represent achievement in a very robust way. We talked in class about adaptive tests and what makes them adaptive. I don't think I need to say anything more about that. I would like you to list 3 advantages of MAP. I put 3 down here. We talked about at least one more in class, so you can appeal to your notes in that case. And then we get on to Lexile Scores. I guess I don't need this down here anymore, so I'm just going to pull this down here. And Lexile Scores again represent reading ability. The lighter area here represents what the student should be doing on their own. The darker area is what they should be doing with instruction. And the question is, what book should she have them read on their own? Well, she should probably pick 1040, because 1040 is right about here. It's in just about everybody's, if not everybody's, I can do it on my own level. So that's good. Book B is beyond a lot of people's levels and so on, and that should be the one really that she uses during instruction. That would help these people right here. Might be a little low for the top 2 people, but hopefully the content would be engaging enough. The 1200 is just too hard. It's beyond just about everybody's range. It is beyond everybody's range because here are the ranges on the side here. So that would be a book that is too difficult. And then you can always, again, write down your bonus material. So I hope you enjoyed this test. If you have any questions, let me know. I will be posting some more videos later on tonight about the other practice exams that are on D2L. Give those a look. Again, there isn't a lot of content here, and I can only ask questions in so many ways. So you're going to get a lot of practice of what directly you are going to be asked to do. If you have any questions, send me an email.